From the shifting shadows of imagination to the blinding light of terror, this is One Tale to Midnight.
Centuries ago, a powerful witch named Ilara lived deep in the dark woods of Black Hollow, Maine. Ilara was feared for her dark magic and insatiable hunger for the youth of the innocent. She lured children into the forest, feeding off their life force to prolong her own. When the townspeople finally gathered the courage to stop her, they buried her alive, her bones bound in iron to keep her soul from roaming. But she placed a curse on the land, vowing to rise again if her grave was disturbed. Over the years, her spirit lingered, calling forth loyal followers who would one day bring her back. Today, a man named Jacob returns to his small hometown in Maine after his young daughter Lily goes missing during a school trip near Black Hollow. Jacob, a determined and loving father, becomes consumed by the search, convinced she has wandered too deep into the forbidden parts of the forest. Locals warn him of the witch's spirit, claiming Black Hollow is haunted, but he brushes it off as superstition. However, he soon finds unsettling traces of his daughter's belongings in the woods. Her red scarf caught in the brambles, her favorite doll near an ancient, eerie tree. During his search, Jacob encounters strange people lurking in the forest, whispering incantations and wearing strange charms. They are the witch's followers, descendants of her ancient coven, who believe they must keep the curse alive to bring her back. They view the children as offerings to strengthen the witch's power and follow him, trying to lead him away. Jacob narrowly escapes an ambush by these followers, but realizes he's dealing with something far darker than he ever imagined. As Jacob ventures deeper into the forest, he starts to experience eerie visions. At night, he hears Lily's voice calling for him, though he knows it's impossible. Apparitions of children flicker in the trees, their faces pale and eyes hollow. Jacob encounters the ghost of a young girl who warns him of Ilara's grave and the power that binds her. She explains that the witch can only be truly destroyed by finding her bones and burning them, severing her link to the living world forever. Following the ghost girl's instructions, Jacob makes his way to the deepest part of the forest, where the air grows colder and silence presses in. There, he discovers the witch's hidden grave. It is marked with ancient symbols and guarded by a twisted oak tree, its branches reaching like clawed hands. The followers try to stop him, chanting spells to protect their dark queen, but Jacob, driven by his love for Lily, fights through them and begins to unearth the grave. With the witch's followers bearing down on him, Jacob finally exposes the witch's bones, wrapped in iron chains. As he sets them aflame, the forest erupts with a dark, thunderous energy. Ilara's spirit rises screaming in fury as her form disintegrates in the fire. The followers howl and try to extinguish the flames, but Jacob holds them off until Ilara is consumed. Her spirit, once a dark shadow hovering over the forest, dissipates into ashes, taking with it the evil that haunted Black Hollow. With the curse broken, the forest falls silent. Dazed and pale, Lily is found near the edge of the woods, freed from the witch's spell. Jacob returns to town with her, and the remaining followers vanish, leaving only the memory of the witch of Black Hollow Woods. Though the town is quiet again, Jacob senses that the forest will never be the same, haunted by whispers of a past evil that nearly claimed his daughter.
The year was 1852. The California gold rush had lured men and women from every corner of the world, each driven by dreams of wealth, by the allure of golden veins hidden beneath the rugged landscape. Among these hopeful souls was a prospector named Silas Cade. He was tall and rugged, with a sharp glint in his eyes and a heart hardened by years of hardship. Silas was no stranger to toil and risk. When he heard the stories of gold glinting in California's rivers and mountains, he packed his few belongings, kissed his luckstone, and set out with a determination that few could match. Silas quickly made his way to gold country, where the rivers were choked with silt, and the air hummed with anticipation and the sound of shovels striking soil. Fortune, it seemed, had smiled upon him. Within weeks of arriving, Silas uncovered a rich vein of gold deep in the hills. He named it Black Cove, after the dark, foreboding cove he had camped near one stormy night. But this gold was no ordinary bounty. Unbeknownst to Silas, Black Cove had a dark reputation among the local tribes and settlers. For centuries, the land was whispered to be under the watchful eye of a mysterious woman named Elda, who lived alone in the hills, wrapped in shadow and rumor. Some claimed she was a healer, others said she was a witch. What everyone agreed upon, however, was that Elda was powerful and not to be crossed. Silas, in his eagerness to strike it rich, paid no heed to these warnings. In fact, when he learned about Elda's reputation, he only laughed. "Let the witch try to take my gold," he chuckled to a group of prospectors gathered around the campfire. "If she shows her face, I'll charm her with a handful of the finest nuggets Black Cove has to offer." The men around the fire laughed with him, but their laughter held a nervous edge. There was something in the air around Black Cove that was more than unsettling. Silas was too consumed by his good fortune to notice the warning looks or the way men avoided the cove. One fog-drenched morning, as Silas prepared to haul his latest load of gold down to the trading post, a figure appeared on the edge of his camp. Silas squinted into the mist and saw a woman, her dark hair tangled, her skin pale as moonlight. She wore a tattered shawl and had eyes that seemed to flicker with an unnatural light. "Are you Elda, the witch of Black Cove?" Silas asked, his voice a mix of bravado and curiosity. The woman's mouth twisted into a smirk. "So that's what they call me," she said, her voice as smooth as silk but cold as river stones. Silas laughed, though he felt a shiver crawl up his spine. "What brings you here? Come to take your share of my gold, witch?" Elda's eyes narrowed. "Your gold? Silas Cade, the land you dig, the rivers you taint with your sifting and greed. This earth is mine. The mountains and the forests have fed me, have given me shelter when your kind would have burned me." Silas shrugged, unbothered. "I don't see your name on it." Her smirk vanished. "Take heed, Silas Cade. Leave this place and forsake this gold, or I will curse it. Every nugget, every glint of gold you claw from the land will bring misfortune, will darken your life until it's nothing but shadow and regret." Silas chuckled and crossed his arms. "You can try, old woman, but no curse will keep me from my fortune." Elda's gaze grew cold, her expression unreadable. She murmured something under her breath, words that sounded like ancient incantations carried by the wind. "It is done," she said softly. "You have chosen greed, Silas Cade. Now face the curse of Black Cove." With that, she turned and melted into the mist, leaving Silas alone with a strange unease stirring in his chest. In the days that followed, Silas found his claim inexplicably more fruitful. Gold seemed to pour from the earth, nuggets as large as his fist. He ignored the warnings, the superstition that haunted the other miners. His fortune grew, but so did his misfortune. On his first trip to town, he was ambushed by highwaymen, barely escaping with his life. His horse went lame, his tools broke with unnatural frequency, and he began to feel a strange sickness creeping over him. Every time he touched the gold, a chill ran through him, a warning he dismissed with a bitter laugh. Silas knew he needed to leave, to cash in his gold and escape Black Cove. He decided to take his hoard to San Francisco, where he planned to board a ship for New Orleans, far from the cursed lands of California. But even as he tried to leave, strange forces seemed to conspire against him. The roads became treacherous, and shadows seemed to follow him at every turn. Eventually, Silas reached San Francisco and boarded the Argosy, a ship bound for New Orleans. He kept his gold close, his eyes sharp for any signs of trouble. But the curse was patient, relentless. As the ship sailed out of the bay, a storm brewed on the horizon, dark clouds swirling in unnatural fury. For days the sea was rough, the waves high and merciless. The crew whispered of foul magic, of ill fortune that seemed to cling to the ship like barnacles. And as the Argosy neared the coast, disaster struck. The storm's full fury unleashed itself upon them, lightning flashing in terrifying streaks across the sky. A great wave crashed against the Argosy, splintering its hull, and the ship began to sink beneath the churning waves. Silas clutched his gold, his face pale with terror as he was thrown overboard into the freezing sea. He barely managed to keep his head above water, watching helplessly as the waves swallowed the ship and the crew, taking his cursed fortune with it. As Silas struggled in the water, he felt the weight of the curse pulling him down, dragging him toward the bottom of the sea. But as he sank, a memory flickered through his mind, a memory of Elda's face, her cold warning. He felt a sudden surge of anger, a fierce, burning desire for revenge. If he was to be cursed, he would take the witch with him. Against all odds, Silas survived. He washed ashore, weak and battered but alive. The curse had stripped him of his fortune, his possessions, and nearly his life, but it had not taken his will to fight. Silas made his way back to Black Cove, his heart set on one thing: finding Elda and ending the curse. He found her deep in the forest, near a rocky cove where the sea crashed against jagged stones. She stood at the edge of the water, watching the waves as if she had been expecting him. "So," she said without turning, "you have returned." "Your curse took everything from me," Silas snarled. "My gold, my life, all I had worked for." Elda turned to face him, her expression calm. "You were warned, Silas Cade. You chose your path." Silas took a step forward, his hand closing around a knife he had taken from a shipwrecked sailor. "Then I choose another path now. If I am cursed, you will be cursed with me." He lunged forward, but Elda was ready. She whispered a spell, and the air around them crackled with energy. Silas felt his limbs grow heavy, his vision blurring, but he pushed forward, driven by his hatred and fury. With a final burst of strength, he plunged the knife into her chest. Elda staggered back, her eyes wide with shock and fury. Her voice was a rasping whisper, filled with both anger and a strange admiration. "You are a fool, Silas Cade," she gasped. "You cannot break a curse by blood. You only deepen it." With that, she fell, her body dissolving into the mist, leaving Silas alone in the silent forest. Silas returned to Black Cove, weary and broken. He had hoped that by ending Elda's life, he would free himself from her curse. But instead, he found himself bound to the cove, unable to leave. The land around him was barren, cursed by the dark magic he had brought upon it. The gold he had once coveted now lay buried at the bottom of the sea, forever out of reach. Years passed, and Silas became a ghostly figure in the forest, haunting the cove where he had once struck it rich. Some say he still wanders there, searching for a way to lift the curse that binds him, his soul trapped in the shadow of the woman he tried to defy. And as for Black Cove, it remains a place of darkness, its shores cursed and its waters treacherous. The locals whisper of a prospector's ghost, of a curse that lingers over the land, waiting to ensnare anyone foolish enough to seek its forbidden gold.
In the harsh winter of 1687, the small village of Braywood lay still beneath a blanket of snow. Among its scattered cottages and dirt paths, one home stood out: the humble smithy of Edmund Graves, a blacksmith known for his skilled ironwork and unyielding spirit. Beside it, hidden within an overgrown grove of twisted trees, was a cottage that had once belonged to his wife, Annabel. She had been a healer and herbalist, but after her mysterious death, the cottage had fallen to her sister Iseult, better known in the village as the witch. The villagers spoke in hushed voices about Annabel's death. She had died suddenly, her body found cold and pale beneath a darkened sky. Whispers of foul play clung to her memory, for Edmund and Annabel's marriage had not been a peaceful one. She had accused him of keeping secrets, of harboring a dark rage beneath his quiet exterior. And so, when she passed, it was Iseult who mourned the hardest. She loved her sister deeply, and a festering suspicion grew in her heart, fueled by grief and anger. She blamed Edmund for her sister's death and swore to make him pay. Iseult was no ordinary woman. She had inherited her family's gifts, strange powers tied to nature and the hidden world. She spoke to the trees, sang to the wind, and understood the language of herbs and roots. But her sister had been the only family she had left, the the last anchor to the world of the living. Now, her heart was dark with sorrow and bitterness. She moved into Annabel's cottage, refusing any warmth from the villagers, who in turn avoided her. One evening, as Isolde prepared a potion, a gust of icy wind swept through her cottage. She closed her eyes, focusing on the whispers it carried, the murmurs of spirits, the echoes of memories. And there, in the dim flicker of her candlelight, she saw a shadowy vision of Annabel's last moments, her sister lying in bed, fear in her eyes as Edmund stood over her, iron tools clutched in his calloused hands. "He killed her," Isolde whispered to the night, "and he will pay." Days turned into weeks, and the village felt Isolde's anger growing like a gathering storm. The townsfolk had long accepted Edmund's stoic demeanor, his dedication to his craft, and his skill in shaping iron into powerful tools. Yet they knew of Isolde's strange powers, of her skill with potions and curses. Whispers of her intent spread through the village, growing with each passing day. One evening, as the blacksmith's hammer echoed against the anvil, Isolde appeared in the forge. Edmund glanced up, his face shadowed by the fire's glow. "You look as if you've seen a ghost witch," he sneered, though his tone held a note of caution. Isolde's eyes were dark as coal, her mouth set in a grim line. "You're no man of honesty, Edmund. I see you for what you are, a murderer. You took my sister from me, and you shall suffer for it." Edmund clenched his fists, his jaw tight with anger. "You're a fool, Isolde. Annabel was sick, and I did what I could to save her." "Lies," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "I saw what you did. You are a man of iron, but iron can do nothing against what I wield." Edmund sneered, defiance glinting in his eyes. "Do your worst, witch." As she left, a shiver ran down his spine, though he refused to show fear. His own daughter, young Elizabeth, had overheard the exchange, hiding in the shadows. She looked up to her father, admiring his strength, but wary of the storm brewing around them. That night, Isolde stood alone in the grove, her hands lifted to the moon, chanting incantations in a forgotten language. Her voice carried through the trees, and a faint blue light glowed around her as she wove her curse. Her breath frosted the air, and shadows seemed to coil around her. "By earth and by stone, by shadow and by bone," she whispered, her voice growing stronger. "Let his strength falter, let his flesh wither, let his iron be his downfall." She cast her spell into the night, feeling the power flow from her fingertips. It wound its way through the village, seeping into the walls of Edmund's forge, curling around the iron tools he had crafted with such skill. And in the heart of her spell, she felt a twisted satisfaction. The next morning, Edmund awoke with an ache in his left leg. He brushed it off as nothing more than the strain of his work. But as the days passed, the pain grew, spreading from his leg to his bones, sapping his strength. Meanwhile, Elizabeth noticed the change in her father. He was no longer the proud, unbreakable blacksmith she had known. His movements were slower, his gaze shadowed with pain and exhaustion. She feared for him, though she dared not speak her worries aloud. Edmund soon understood the depth of Isolde's curse. Every time he touched iron, his strength faded, his leg throbbed with searing pain, and his breath grew short. The once mighty blacksmith felt himself weakened, his body betraying him. But he was a man of resolve, and he refused to let Isolde's magic overpower him. One evening, he fashioned a brace for his leg, hoping to ease the pain, but the metal seared his skin, blackening his flesh. The curse was relentless, yet he refused to surrender. He kept working, using his remaining strength to forge one last piece, a dagger, cold and sharp, its blade honed to a deadly edge. "I will end this," he muttered through gritted teeth. "No witch will take my life without a fight." Elizabeth watched her father, worry deepening in her heart. She knew the blacksmith was proud, too proud to admit his vulnerability, but she could not bear to see him suffer. As the days turned into weeks, her heart hardened. She would not stand by and watch her father fall to Isolt's curse. Elizabeth, trembling with determination, went to her aunt's cottage one cold evening. She found Isolt by the fire, her eyes hollow with grief and her hands stained with herbs and ash. "What do you want, child?" Isolt asked, her tone weary but sharp. Elizabeth's voice was barely a whisper. "Teach me, Aunt Isolt. Teach me the magic you wield, the ways of the old world." Isolt studied her, surprised by the girl's request. "You wish to betray your father?" Elizabeth's eyes met hers, a mixture of fear and defiance. "No, but I will not let him die without a chance to understand what haunts him. I want to know the secrets of my mother, of you." A flicker of admiration crossed Isolt's face. She saw the same spirit that Annabel had possessed, the same unyielding will. And so, with a mixture of pride and sorrow, Isolt took her niece under her wing. She taught her to recognize herbs, to listen to the whispers of the wind, to weave spells that could protect and curse alike. The bond between them grew, and though Elizabeth loved her father, she began to understand the world in which Isolt lived, a world of shadows and secrets, of power that could not be measured in iron or stone. One winter evening, Edmund, his body weakened and his leg wasted, limped toward Isolt's cottage. He held the dagger he had forged, the last piece of iron he had dared to touch. The blacksmith was a shadow of his former self, but his eyes held a burning determination. Isolt sensed his presence, stepping outside to meet him in the snow-covered grove. Her face was calm, but her hands sparked with the remnants of her last spell. "Have you come to face your punishment, Edmund?" she asked, her voice as cold as the winter air. Edmund raised his dagger, his grip unsteady but firm. "You stole my strength, but I'll have your life, witch." With a flick of her wrist, Isolt summoned the shadows to her side, a wall of darkness that curled and coiled like living smoke. She muttered incantations, her words barely audible over the crackling energy that surged around her. Edmund lunged, his blade slicing through the air, but the shadows twisted, blurring his vision, and the blade missed its mark. Isolt struck out with her magic, her fingers crackling with a pale blue light. The spell hit Edmund's leg, and he stumbled, his left leg buckling under him as pain shot through his body. But he did not yield. Summoning every last ounce of his strength, he charged again, his dagger catching Isolt's arm and drawing blood. She cried out, her magic faltering for an instant, but her fury grew, and she unleashed a spell that sent him sprawling to the ground. The curse had taken its toll. Edmund lay in the snow, gasping for breath, his left leg mangled beyond recognition. He had fought with every fibre of his being, but the witch's power had proven too strong. Isolt stood over him, triumphant, though her own wounds throbbed. "Your iron has failed you, Edmund. This land does not belong to men of stone and fire. It is ours, mine, Annabel's and Elizabeth's." The villagers found Edmund the next morning, his left leg maimed, his spirit broken. He would never walk unaided again, his days of iron and fire reduced to memories. Elizabeth watched over him, torn between her love for her father and her loyalty to her aunt. In the days that followed, Elizabeth returned to Isolt's cottage, her heart filled with both fear and fascination. She became Isolt's apprentice in earnest, learning the ways of shadow and spell, the secrets that had once seemed so distant. As she grew in power, the villagers came to fear her as they had feared Isolt. They whispered of the young witch, the girl who had been the blacksmith's daughter, but was now bound to the shadows, the one who had become the heir of Black Hollow's curse. And in the quiet moments, when the wind howled through the trees, Elizabeth would think of her mother, of her father's suffering, and of her aunt's teachings. She knew she was destined for a path of power, a life woven with magic and shadow, bound forever to the legacy of Black Hollow Forge.
Please like and subscribe. because I have more tales to tell.